Liza will resonate with you if you are a founder or a budding entrepreneur who wants to build a business with purpose and you haven't yet taken the leap to be your own boss. Liza's going to share a few secrets to help you know when you're ready. And I am very, very excited to welcome Liza to the stage. We'll start at the very beginning for anybody who doesn't know you. I know you and I have spoken a lot over the last few months and really got to know each other. But for anybody in the room who doesn't know you and your journey of an entrepreneur,
Sure.
Start at the beginning.
So I have been an entrepreneur since 19 when I accidentally kind of stumbled into it and then have caught the bug and unable to kick it since then. I have founded, failed, exited, and failed spectacularly and gloriously, and succeeded several businesses since then. I'm an investor in others. I sit on the board of a couple of companies, and I now also advise quite a few startups and scale-ups and also SMEs. So I have kind of had the fun of, whilst unintentionally stumbling into the ecosystem, really embodying it as my life. And for now, I focus a lot around impact and purpose-driven organizations. So companies who are out to kind of make a serious impact or to change the way that we perceive business as usual.
Amazing. Yeah. And so you mentioned their impact. Have you always been involved in kind of impact businesses, or is this something you've kind of learned and felt like it's more you along the way?
I wish I could say I had. I'm not dissimilar to what Rob mentioned. I was in film and TV, was my most significant company that I have founded. And I can't say that we're always the best at impact in that industry. So I think after I exited that business, it became a real thing of trying to figure out what next. And for me, it became a discussion of legacy and a little bit of paying penance for, the sins of my industry. And it, for me, was really fascinating all of a sudden, having seen the capability. I think if anyone who's an entrepreneur, we spend a lot of our time making nothing into reality and forging something with nothing but your sheer belief and sheer will into something that exists, and not only exists, but makes money and employs people and creates an impact. And I think for me, having seen that and experienced that firsthand, it was, okay, what's the next level of this? And what is the next challenge? And having seen so many companies that are incredibly well-intentioned or incredibly capable who almost just seem to miss a piece, it became this, it's nothing short of an obsession of sorts, of how can we actually unleash business as a force for good? Why do I have to choose between for purpose or for profit? Why can't I have both? So maybe it was just sheer greed.
And for that sort of impact piece,
yeah.
What is an impact business? What does that actually mean in practice?
So to me, and forgive me for being a little waxing capitalist philosophy here, to me, when we talk about value creation in a capitalist sense, back to Adam Smith, it's value creation in a holistic sense. We, somewhere along the way, depending on Milton Friedman, what other economic philosophy you want to go with, decided that value creation only meant financial. And it only meant that all we wanted from our companies was financial return. And for me, that impact is actually sitting there and going back, and whether it's the accountability of looking at the impact your business is having on its community or in the world around you, or for me, more generally, it's the ability to sustain. For so many businesses, they're built in a system that will not allow them to sustain going forward decades with this landscape of volatility. So for me, impact is understanding your impact, creating an impact, as well as making sure that you get to exist and the volatility that will come. So no matter what scale your business is, that you have to do, we as human beings, we can't go through the world taking from everyone. We're taught as children that you have to give and take, yet somehow we give it permission to companies to just take. So for me, it's how do we create businesses that go back in that balance of give and take.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay. With the impact piece, is that for some of our founders that have already launched, they've got their business model set and everything else, if they're thinking, well, there's something in here that's not quite right, can you pivot along the way? Is it possible?
Totally. And keep in mind, impact gets tossed around as this general term. For every company, it's a way of, you'll have your own recipe. And the nice thing is, often, if you actually take the time to figure out what impact means for you, it actually can become a serious positive risk opportunity. So it means that you can create better market share, more resilience, and it can often have positive benefit. And you can build it in later. Obviously, if you start from day one with it, it becomes easier to integrate. If you wait till too late, like I did with my last business, I had to take it down pretty much to bare bones to effectively implement that impact and then relaunch it. But you also can integrate it along the way. The biggest question, I think, if anyone's curious about a sense of impact or purpose, or even if it's from a altruistic sense or just How can I make my company more successful? Just ask, what do you want to do, or what could you be doing better? That's usually where I look with companies that I serve on the board of or companies that I'm advising is, okay, where are we most at risk? Where could we most easily succeed? And what does the legacy we want to leave behind?
You mentioned there your last company and you sort of stripped it back and,
Yeah.
and relaunched. Can you tell that story a little bit and what the business did and then what
Sure.
you then pivoted to?
So I had a consultancy. I was running two businesses at the time. I had one company. We had a team of 15. We had originally started off as a kind of a brand strategy consultancy. I had sold a business and was meant to be retired for 6 months, unintentionally stayed retired for 6 hours before I accepted a contract from someone, just couldn't rest. And next thing I know, I was building a very reactive business. I think for a lot of us, we fall in love with a problem or we fall in love with an idea and we just can't wait to sink our teeth into it. I had that and I wanted to get going and I never stopped to ask myself any bigger questions. I'm sure I'm probably not alone on that. And so I ended up building this really reactive business and a client would come along and say, hey, you've done really great with this one area. Can you do this area too? Next thing I know, about 2 years later, I was running a technical supply chain optimization consultancy, having no idea about anything supply chain oriented. And all of a sudden realized that I had a company that was built basically and held together by duct tape and Band-Aids. And I think as a founder, most of us, you kind of have to use a lot of duct tape and Band-Aids along the way because you have to bootstrap, you have to get there. But at some point in time, the idea is that you can take off that duct tape and you can take off that Band-Aid because you're building the infrastructure behind it. And I ultimately realized, A, I didn't want to be there, which was a hard day. B, that it was literally nothing but duct tape and Band-Aids. And C, that I had people who counted on me and relied on me. And I had no intention of holding their careers for the long term. So it became a situation of I took a team from, 18 total, but 15 full-time, down to just me. And had to start again from scratch. So it was, a tough couple of days, but it was actually probably the most surgical and easy of all the times I failed a business.
And just then into that, how do you do that in reality?
How do you step away?
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing is for us as founders, we're often told, I think just even hearing of that VC pitch deck, we often hear about these unicorns and all of us have to be to some level, and I'm not meaning this in a insulting way because it 100% applies to me. We all have to be somewhat delusional. We have to believe that in a world when everyone else hasn't been able to do this, that we can do it. When in a world where 99% of the people don't get capital or don't make it, we can do it. And you have to believe that, but also at the same time, you sometimes need to have this accountability of why am I doing this? And to be able to say, also what do I need out of it? Because not all of us aren't, like I was at 19 or 25 where, you're grinding out, 20 hours of a 24-hour day and paying yourself nothing and sweating to make that VC proud of you. Most of us, that isn't actually long-term viable. So you have to understand selfishly also, what am I getting out of it and where am I going? And sometimes it means that you're not meeting those anymore. Sometimes it means that your company's gone a place that you don't want it to. Or with my film company, I actually just realized I was no longer the best CEO. And sometimes then you just have to say, what's my way out? And don't get me wrong, it's lovely when you get to have your way out be a liquidation event, if that's what you're intending, and get all your cash back. But sometimes you also just need to hold yourself accountable to, it's not working, this isn't for me, or what are my other options? And ask your network and figure out, what can I do? Can I sell it? Can I sell pieces of it? Can I sell it my share? How do I wrap it down? And let me be really clear in something. Just because it doesn't work doesn't mean that you don't work. Or it doesn't mean that you're not a good entrepreneur or your idea wasn't amazing or anything else. It just meant, as Rob said right now about funding, it just meant it might not have been right now. I have a client of mine that I've advised for years. They had a business that they wrapped down about 7 or 8 years ago and have just restarted up and have just raised a huge round. I had an AI business that I tinkered with, decided it wasn't the right time, and just sold it for pieces. Well, not pieces, but in pieces, about a year and a half ago. And I would have told you, if you had asked me at the moment when I decided that wasn't the time, I could have told you I was a failure, but actually it just wasn't the time for that business. So make sure you don't, I know it's easy to say this sitting in this chair, try not to tie your identity to the outcome of your business, because it makes it really hard then to make sometimes the best decisions.
You mentioned accountability there and the decision making. How do you? Don't want to ask the question of how do you know it's right when it's right to make the decision.
Yeah.
But when we've talked previously, you've kind of said, okay, actually setting yourself some ground rules, setting yourself objectives, milestones, and accepting that if, okay, here's the decision on that outcome.
Yep.
Can you tell everyone a little bit about that and then how you've done it in practice?
Sure. I should clarify, I'm an engineer by training, so I love a system. I also can be an absolute ADHD hurricane. So I've had to find a way of balancing those two. And for me, one of those is actually trying to figure out accountability touch points. And I think as a founder, one of my early venture-backed businesses, I was young and insecure and had no idea what I was doing in a sense. So I ended up just chasing whoever told me I was doing a good job, and ended up kind of just like a hamster in a wheel, hoping to like get that positive dopamine fix. And all of a sudden realized I was miserable. I had terrible mental health, and my company wasn't anywhere where I wanted it to go. And I think, so it became one of those things of, whilst being an entrepreneur and, you know, having that, if you want that $1 billion business, that unicorn, or making that spectacular impact is a wonderful thing. At the same time, you're living the one life you have. So you need to kind of make sure that you're getting out of it what you need, and you're not just surrendering your entire life to making a VC happy or hitting a deadline. And I know some people might kick me for saying that and really don't agree with it. That's just my opinion. And I think, so then for me, it's allowed me to be, by having those accountability points, which I'll answer in a second, it's allowed me to get better funding from people. It's allowed me to be more clear with investors and who my founder fit is. It's allowed me to be better clear with my strategy. And so those accountability points are often asking myself, what do I need out of this? So whether that looking at, do I have children or family who depend upon me? Or do I have a mortgage? Or do I have goals that I'd like to hit personally? Do I have professional things? You know, what do I actually need out of what I'm building? That, keep in mind, that also doesn't have to be like, I won't deviate. I was about to go down a rabbit hole. So it's, what do I need out of this? Where do I want it to go? What is the impact I want to make? And those answers don't have to be perfect, but every time I found a new business, I usually answer those and I give them to someone to hold me accountable. So whether it's that an advisory board member, a good friend, someone who usually is not afraid to tell me I'm being an idiot. And so then those accountability points are just things that you know that you need or that you want, or, hey, look, if my mental health is struggling or if I'm making stupid decisions, you're willing to ring the bell on me. And make sure it's someone who, it's almost like you might have heard the term your personal board. It's making sure that I have people around me who will tell me I'm being a fool, I'm being unhealthy, I'm being not taking care of myself, I'm not serving myself. And those accountability points, whatever they are for you, it's just making sure that they're there so that whatever you're building, you're making sure that are going on the track of where you actually want to go, instead of being like me who has to tear it back down to nothing to attempt to rebuild it again.
Brilliant, thank you. We've touched a little bit today on failure. We've all experienced it, and it's good that we're all talking about it. But let's talk a little bit about success.
Yeah. Okay.
We've touched on investment a lot today, and the investment journey, investment strategy, how to raise, how to pitch. But actually, what about raising a company that doesn't need investment, that actually makes sales? Can you build a profitable company whilst also not selling your soul and keeping it purpose-driven?
Totally. I don't know about for you guys, but I was told when I first kind of intentionally chose to be an entrepreneur, 19, I had no idea what I was doing, was that VC was king. And everyone, go get VC, go get capital, grow, grow, grow. And it's a wonderful story, but it is definitely not the only story. For me, I think my current business, well, the one that I'm in the process of launching now, we are aiming with the very clear intention of being profit driven. So we'll be cash flow positive within the first year and then fund all of our growth internally. One of my other businesses, we've taken very small angel investment. So I think it's really clear, it's very clearly possible to build a successful business that doesn't require a liquidation event and to match someone's portfolio. Not there's anything wrong with that, but understand for your business, as I said earlier, where do you want to go and what do you want out of it? If you want a lifestyle business, if you want a business that ticks you over a certain amount of cash each month and that you want to have for years and years, explore angel investors with someone who's not needing to return a portfolio. Explore grants. Explore how can I build, and maybe I have to do it in a more streamlined sense to get cash flow positive. Explore different revenue models to actually get there. But you can piecemeal a company, and I don't want to say piecemeal in terms of a diminishing sense. You can build a company in whatever route you need. You've got huge amounts of options available to you, and the UK is actually one of the markets that's developing really nicely for angel investing. And you get huge portfolios of angel investors here. Part of it's tricky because you need to know someone. If you're ever looking for an angel investor, find me on LinkedIn or get in touch with me. I'm happy to introduce you to anyone I know because I think it's one of the most undervalued resources for a lot of entrepreneurs. But find angel investors who back what you believe. There's lots who are coming in the market who are looking at evergreen structures or longer term portfolios who, if you're out to make an impact that aligns with them, are content to be along for your ride. Success is a wonderful thing, but knowing what your success is more important than chasing after a VC's definition of success. That's not to say if you need a VC-backed business, chase after their definition of success because they're very good at what they do, but just understand if that's the success that you want first.
Brilliant, thank you. And I should mention also, probably behind us, you can see there is a Slido code. So we are going to take questions with Liza towards the end. So please submit your questions on Slido and we'll come to those shortly as well.
And I'm happy to answer anything. I failed a lot too, so I can talk about success, but I'm also very happy to talk about lessons learned from in that space.
let's talk about the leadership piece.
Yep.
So with investment potentially comes a board. Sometimes without investment, comes a board as well. An advisory board is a really, really great thing to have. How do you, as a founder, Rob mentioned investor fit and VC fit. How do you get board fit? Because in my experience, I've seen a board make, and I've also seen a board utterly destroy a company. Yeah. It's entirely possible. How do you manage that as a founder when also you need what they've got?
Yeah. So I think I mentioned this on one of our calls for you. A friend of mine said one of my favorite phrases that's rung true for me so much through my entrepreneurial journey. She asked me, how well resourced are you? And my initial instinct as an entrepreneur was to be like, well, I've got this amount of runway and I've got this amount of investor leads. And I had never actually stopped. She stopped me and clarified what she meant. And she said that make sure that you've got actual ample resources around you for you as a human being to get to where you need to go. And one of those spaces is making sure that, as I said a moment ago, that you have those voices who are willing to tell you a tough truth. And because as a founder, as I said before, we have to be slightly delusional. You have to slightly believe that you know best or that you can get it done or whatever it is. But sometimes that means that we get down rabbit holes or we get lost on a path and someone else might actually have an idea that will get us there faster, better, easier. And so for boards or advisory boards, many of us have heard lessons where the only thing they know about a board is when the VC has come in and they've disagreed. For me, the greatest thing that I first discovered boards by building out my own board. In part, I had to do it. I raised a £150 million fund for internally in one of my companies. And that required a lot of oversight and guidance I was 25 years old. So naturally, people wanted to chaperone me quite a bit. And it didn't go so well until it did. When all of a sudden someone actually told me, why don't you have independent directors? Why don't you have people who are actually turning your board from something that you feel obliged to do into something that becomes your war council? So I think for a lot of founders, you don't necessarily have to build a board where someone is an investor director or where you have to give away equity. You can always build an advisory board if you're nervous about it, but make sure that you have those resources around you. Pull in, for me now, a lot of the companies I advise, before they go out and raise capital, I often recommend for them to put an independent NED on their board so that you have a voice who, as a founder, who backs you up or who echoes you or who you have a strong relationship with, who also then can play an intermediary between you and your first investor director. If you're going out and, let's say, raising £1 million round, your lead investor is going to probably want to put, I'm just picking random numbers, probably want to put someone on your board. Why not have a voice on there who you know that you already have a strong relationship with, who will be able to create a relationship with your investor? And in case things, let's say you and your investor aren't agreeing, you have someone then on your board who has an equal weight and vote to your investor and who also then can step out and kind of play a middleman, who might be able to tell you something that you haven't seen and that you don't want to hear from your investor, and who might be able to also check your investor. And it's making sure that you've got those resources around you that can be advocates for you, can challenge you, who can support you, and also so that you just don't have to do it all by yourself. So it's one of those really special things of making sure, and a lot of people, we all have an ego. We all love to be valued for the experience and the wisdom we bring to the world. A lot of people will be willing, you'd be surprised, to step in and serve on a board or be an advisor to you because they are so stinking flattered that you asked. So don't be afraid to get ambitious with people that you admire or who know your field. I mean, I just reached out to a guy who is like the grandfather of my field and asked if he'd be an advisor to my company very punctually. And he just said yes. I mean, he said he had questions, but like, I literally sent him a LinkedIn message. I feel really bad admitting that after Rob just being like, don't LinkedIn message people. And he just said yes. And I would have never thought he would. And I don't necessarily know what that relationship will look like, but all of a sudden now I get to put on my deck that he is an advisor to my company. I get to ask him opinions, things that I believe. I now have this amazing voice who has walked this for 40 years and has served on like 80 plus boards and impacted some huge corporates and organizations. I get to ask his opinion for things. Why the heck would I not do that?
Brilliant.
Sorry, I probably rambled in a wide-ranging direction there.
Not at all. No, really, really insightful. And on the resources, what are the resources as a founder? You and I talk about resources all the time, but it could sort of mean anything. So you've talked there about actually your advisory board and non-exec directors. What other resources as a founder in your experience are really, really important?
Network. I would say one of the things is, whether it's a network, if you do need to raise cash or this and that, put yourself in as many places that you can where you can be vulnerable. Like I'm happy to recommend a couple of different, whether it's LinkedIn groups or WhatsApp groups or this and that, like, there's Founders, ICE, there's a bunch of different organizations where you can kind of walk in and be able to say, X, Y, and Z is happening in my company. I don't know what to do. And 100 people will reply back to you with their opinions. It's put yourself in places where not only can you get support and your mental wellness can be supported, but where you can scale your time. You don't have to learn every lesson by yourself. That is something that I will hold up my hands and say I was really bad at for about a decade. You don't have to learn every lesson by yourself. Put yourself in places where other people can scale your time, where you can stand on other people's shoulders, learn their lessons. So I think for me it's networks and finding places where you can learn, be vulnerable, get support. I think one of it is I always build a personal board of directors. So it's not necessarily just for my company. It's people who I admire, aspire to be, value, or who I also know. Like one of the people on my personal board of directors, excuse my French, challenges the shit out of me. And I love her to bits. I have some of my hardest conversations with her, but she is one of the most valuable people I have on my personal board of directors because she makes sure that I'm doing everything intentionally. She makes sure that everything is valuable. And she is the first person to call me out if she thinks I'm being dumb. And it's not about her ego. She will listen to me when I clarify back what's going on, but she's always a checkpoint to make sure that I actually think about what I'm doing. So I think personal board of directors and a community.
Personal board of directors. Yeah. Just describe to everyone actually what that means for you.
It's like a mentor, I guess. It's basically, I have about 6 or 7 people who at any given time kind of serve my personal board of directors. When I'm being really good, I have a quarterly meeting with all of them. I'll take them all out to dinner. But usually I make sure that every other month I'm checking in with them. And it's people who I get really point blank with. I'm building right now, one of my businesses is very impact oriented. It's very purpose driven, but also it needs to be for profit in order to get to where it needs to go. And I need to make sure that my thinking is checked on that. It's like I need to have a space where I can go to someone and be like, am I charging enough for this product? And then were they equally, like we just had our personal board meeting last month, and one of my directors said, are you charging enough for you? And which is I'm horribly bad at. So it's a space where I've got 6 or 7 people who sit on that and who ask me the tough questions where I can take off all gloves. I don't have to worry about them perceiving me as investable. And I can be as point blank as I need. I can be as tactical as I need. I can be as soft and fluffy as I need, who are helping me develop personally and professionally. And usually they're people who I have the one who challenges me, but a lot of them are people who are going to be able to rapidly escalate the speed at which I can do something because I'm getting to stand on their experience. So So I think go out and it's a place, go get ambitious with people who can make half your learning time, quarter your learning time, who will introduce you to connections, as Rob said, or who will let you stand on their shoulders. And it doesn't mean that you have to go out and hope Elon Musk will be on your board. It might actually be that if you're in fintech, there might be someone who's at a bank who might know a lot about regulation or compliance, or might have built a career you really value. It's just making sure that you've got people around you who literally that you are accountable to nothing minus your own curiosity. Like they can't pull a veto on my company. They can't force a liquidation. They can't do anything else. So they're literally just there for my own curiosity. Does that make me sound really selfish and terrible?
No, but I was going to ask, because I mean, you buy them dinner, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I go for dinner.
Yeah.
But do you have contracts in place with them, or is it an understanding, or is it just actually like what's in it for them? I suppose is the question I want to ask.
No, I don't have any. For my personal board of directors, I have no contracts in place. One was a coach for me at one point in time, who's rolled over since then. But other than that, no. What's in it for them? They get free dinner. They often buy very expensive wine, so I think that might be what's in it for them. And then I think most human beings like to give back. I mean, I think the majority of us, if we have got the time and it fits in our schedule, don't mind going to get a coffee or don't mind poking through a problem with other people. I don't know if it's just me, but often when I actually get to look and step outside of my own companies and into someone else's space, it often actually helps with my thinking back to my company or back to my own spaces. It'll trigger a thought that I might not have had when I was running around my hamster wheel. So I think for a lot of people, it helps. It also can help you. I serve on the board of directors for companies, but also for a couple of other entrepreneurs I know on their personal board. And honestly, it's just also really fun to get to see someone that you respect succeed. For my actual board of directors, yes, I do put them on contracts. Always. I think one thing I will say as an entrepreneur, the best thing you can do is keep an honest man honest. Like if you're going to work with a friend, it's amazing if you've got friends that you can work with. Clarify everything up front in the contract, so in case something goes sideways or there's something you don't see eye to eye on, it's clear. Your board of directors, make it really clear as to what you're doing. Your advisory board, make it really clear as to what you're doing. And just keep an honest man honest. It makes your life a whole lot easier because you've got other things to worry about.
I think also with your personal board, if you haven't got one or you're not sure if you have one, I think if you sat and thought about it for a few minutes, you'd realise that you've probably not been operating with a personal board for quite some time when you think, well, actually, when this happens, I call this person. And somebody once said to me, the best mentors are the ones that don't realise they're your mentor.
Yeah.
and actually, they're the favourite people because they want to give up their time. And often all you have to do is take a little bit of their advice, and they're so chuffed that you've taken it on board as a founder and come back and said, look, you told me about this thing and now I did it, that they're going to give you more advice. People want to help. I think that's really great.
I think I'd also ask, if you're thinking about building a personal board of directors, the number one question is, who wants to see you succeed? Ask first, I will hold up my hands, and I know this makes me sound like a kid. My mom and dad are on my personal board of directors, and they've actually been incredibly helpful, and from technical reasons, but also God bless my mom. She will ask questions that are probably perceived as dumb, but that are very valuable because she doesn't know my space. But also, when I'm having a bad day, will tell me whatever I need to feel better. So when you first look at doing it, and I also would say this for your board of directors, for advisory board, for anything that you're bringing into your company, who is out to help you succeed? Because there's no point in bringing in someone who you can't answer that with a resounding yes. Because they're going to be inside your head, inside your inner sanctum, inside the inner part of your company. And if they're not 100% there to help you succeed, question as to why you're letting them in.
Brilliant. Let's talk about readiness as a founder. And I know we had a lot of founders in the room at Slush last year. I know there's some in the room today that have got an amazing side hustle. And it's often how most startups are born, really.
Yep.
But actually, you're in a full-time job. You've got a family, young children. You've got a house and a mortgage to pay, and you've got life commitments. And you're in a job that supports you and that has nice benefits.
Yeah.
But you've got this nagging side hustle in your head, and you might have built a thing. You're thinking, well, how do I know when I'm ready to actually go, do you know what? I'm going to leave that job. I'm going to go and pursue my startup when there's a lot of risk behind it.
I wish I had the magic formula for that, but I will tell you what I use. I think for every person, it's going to be different. And you have to ask yourself that question before of what do I want out of it? And for me, I look at forward and reverse engineering. So I'll say, okay, look, if here's where I want to go, and here's what I think this company could do, I'll try and reverse engineer how I can get there. But also I look at forward engineering. So like for me, for example, I had sworn up and down I would not found another business. I had told that to my other half. I had made him promise that he would not let me found another business. And lo and behold, I've just founded 2 at the same time. And so that would actually, what that did though mean was that the business that I had that was paying me a steady income and the work that I was doing all of a sudden was not going to have as much time available. So for me, when I was actually looking at, okay, what do I need? I discovered, okay, here's what I need every month to make payments on mortgage, kids, whatever else you have. Expensive hobbies if you're an equestrian like me, not a bright choice. Basically figure out what do I need every month? What do I need to feel safe? Because let's be honest, being an entrepreneur, one of the hardest things it is sheer force of will. You wake up every day and it is, whether something happens or something doesn't happen, is often based on how you show up. And especially early stage, it becomes a little bit easier when you've got more of a team in place. But just understand, I think an undervalued question is, what do I need to feel safe? Because you're going to have to, if you're not meeting that criteria, it's going to be real hard for you to show up again and again and again and forge something from nothingness into reality. So I ask, kind of pivotal questions and figure out, okay, without information, how long do I have my own personal runway? How long can I give myself where that isn't met or where I can cover that in other forces? And then how can I kind of get into my business from here? And so I kind of try and reverse engineer a plan. But at the end of the day, you just have to, for me, it's always that moment when I'm losing more time in my actual paying job than I am chasing the thing that I want to chase. That usually becomes my point of jump. But it's at least trying to figure out, like, so for me, part of the reason I started serving on a couple boards and advising businesses was it was a way to give myself consistent capital while freeing up time to pursue a business that I wanted to create. So it's how can I get creative maybe to cover those? But also, as I said before, if you've got, let's say, kids and a mortgage and you know that you really only have 6 months at this rate, and then maybe you can take, if as long as your company's paying half of that, you can do another 6 months, you need to make sure that you're really holding yourself accountable to those things. It doesn't mean that you're not a great founder or that you're not dedicated to your company or your impact or your vision, whatever it is. You are also a human being who deserves to be taken care of as well. So if your company needs to do that in 12 months, make sure you've got board of advisors, you've got advisors around you, you've got people around you who know how to make that happen and who can help you make that happen, who can say, instead of saying someone who's going to push you to go get VC capital and you can be revenue positive in 3 years, that could be wonderful. But if you need to be revenue positive in a year, make sure you're putting the systems and the milestones in place to get revenue positive within a year.
That's brilliant. It's hard to do, and I think that comes back to that accountability piece, isn't it? Of the, but it could be this, or it's so close, or it could be this, but actually it's going, no, it was going to be this at this point.
Yeah.
And that doesn't necessarily mean it's the end. It's just we're not there, let's try this, or do something else, or go back to work.
I am an investor in a company who the founders stopped working full time for the startup for a year. They went and worked elsewhere. They needed to get cash in the bank. They had some cash available, brought in a team member who kind of kept things ticking over organically for them for a year. And then one of them came back, and they actually they're basically poised to, I think they're almost triple what their valuation was when they went away. They've actually pivoted into something more effective because they weren't then just grinding themselves in the ground. They were able to actually build intentionally. We chatted about managing their investor relations really well, so they let their investors know what was going on. When they raised new capital, they were really clear onto what their story was and why they were doing it, and they just found investment that fit. So I think anything is manageable as long as you get really clear on why and are really strong in what you're doing.
Amazing. I think I'm going to open up some questions from the floor now. Ali is poised with a microphone and has your questions on Slido. Do you want to kick us off?
Perfect. We have 2 questions on your personal board, so I'll start with those. The first one is, do you speak to them as a whole or individually when you meet them?
So if I know that I've got something, like, for example, when I was contemplating breaking my oath to my other half and founding not one but two businesses at a time, because I become a bit of a nightmare when I do that. I've talked with all of them. When there's something that is big, or where there's something that I'm really down a rabbit hole on, or where there's something where I'm unsure on, I usually will talk to them all collectively, because part of the value of having them all together is they have very different opinions. And then I get to almost step back and kind of hear how they bounce off of each other and what they'll all say. And it often also will raise questions that I haven't answered. Like, for example, one of my businesses now, when they all got together, actually having them all together, a product line idea came out of having them all together. And that was incredibly valuable. But I also make sure to have one-on-one conversations with them, because, as I said before, they each drive a value. And my friend who asked me the really hard questions, it's probably not helpful for her to sit in front of the person who I absolutely has my dream career and who I admire to be, have her just poking at me, because I probably won't answer as honestly. Or I'll be more PR-y in how I answer, because I'm worried about impressing someone else. So I definitely would recommend, whether it's your personal board or your actual board, make sure you build relationships with all of them, because it's never going to harm you.
Great, thank you. And when you have these meetings, are they fully about you and what you're doing, or are they more kind of a casual conversation where you bring in what you're working on?
It depends. I have actually given a board pack. If any of you guys have ever been in a board meeting, I've literally given an agenda and a board pack with materials to my personal board of directors before. I have a very good assistant. I won't take all accountability for that.
And you also love stationery.
I do. I really do love stationery. I love Canva. So I sometimes will do that. I think it depends on the topic. I mean, I think if I need to really harness them down, if I have a burning question that I really want their opinion on, it's like if I were to ask all of you right now a general question, if I give you no warning, it's a lot harder for you to answer. Where if I can help give you the materials that you need, if I had given all of you 20 minutes beforehand, had given you a case study, some context, something to look through, all of a sudden you'd have the conversation for both sides would be more valuable. So I think if it's just, I want to float some ideas off, or hey, I'm exploring this, and they don't need any context, that's fine. I think if it's something where there's something specific that I'm really looking to get value out of, it's the preparation counts. And that also applies for a board meeting or an advisory meeting. Help set up the people who are helping you, help set them up in the best way possible. Give them the resources they need, give them the time to prep, and give them the space to tell you, to support you, and to challenge you. Because also it's a lot harder to challenge someone if you're not prepared.
Great, thank you. And the next one, how do you protect your mental health and protect your non-work life, particularly from the highs and lows of entrepreneurship?
That's some good questions.
That's a very good question. I will say this, I think it's easier being a serial, and I don't mean that as a breakfast food, but as a serial entrepreneur, because my ego isn't as tied into it anymore. I think if you're a first-time founder or a second-time founder, so much of your identity is still poured into what you're doing, because it takes this huge part of you. It takes this huge piece of your energy, of your presence, of your being to, as I said before, keep saying again and again, to forge something into reality. And I think it's tough. Everyone always tells you don't put it as part of your identity. It's hard to say that when it's your first time doing it, you've never walked that path before. I think for me, one of the biggest learnings was, that if a business failed, it didn't mean that I was a failure. I'll clarify, I was a film producer for a while, one of my businesses. I mean, it's the single riskiest asset in the world. We had basically, I think, 18 films in slate one year, and only one made it to cinema. We had another year where we had 8 films in cinema, because they had been, over a period of time, it just took a while for production. Only 2 of them were box office, were significant revenue returners. One of them was a massive failure. And I think for me, I got a really high-scale, high-speed education in failure. And it was really helpful all of a sudden to realize, no matter what this business does, as long as my rule now is, as long as I've helped one person or done one thing, it's been worth it. Because in part, I'm also not dumping every financial piece I have into it. So I think boundaries help. Mental wellness, make sure that walk away. Like I've had this, I actually had my other half call me out on this. I think we spoke about this 2 weeks ago. I had this real panic of, if I didn't do it, no one else would. And if I didn't do it, I was going to miss this opportunity. If I didn't do it, I was going to lose money, or I was going to lose this chance, or whatever it was. And I was blown past my point of diminishing return, and I just wasn't showing up in the best way I possibly could, and my mental health was rapidly slipping. And I fortunately had friends and people around me who were basically like, pause, what are you doing? And so it's one of those things of making sure that actually some of the best investments you can make in yourself is play. Set it down, go out for a walk. I have a little ridiculous dog who was meant to be here but was going to cause chaos. I go take him for a walk, or go take him to run around. You have a beautiful beach, go play on it. Go do something ridiculously, it's silly. I think, chatted about this. I will literally sometimes go and just dance around to a ridiculously bad song. Just something that has no purpose related to my company. Like, that is the biggest thing I think you can do, is you do not have to be your company all the time. And if you take a break, your company is not going to fail. If you take a moment, if you go on a holiday, if you don't answer a phone, if you decide that I'm going to go unplug at 4 p.m. today because I'm going to go to a yoga class, or I'm going to go hear a concert, I'm going to go take my significant other out for a nice dinner, you are not a failure. It actually will make you better at your job. You will actually have more resilience, you'll have more energy, you'll have more everything. So just make sure that, especially if you're fundraising, spend some time to make sure that you are okay. And when you go out to those fundraising meetings, as Rob said, just because they say no might not mean it's not right now for them. But for you, it doesn't mean that your idea is bad, or that's a no to your idea, or it's a no to you. It just doesn't mean that you don't fit in the strategy of their portfolio. So especially if you're fundraising, make sure you literally block time in your calendar to go out and do something that isn't fund related, that is making sure that you get some time to recharge. Because more than likely you're going to need it.
And in my experience, don't fundraise over Christmas.
Yeah.
You have a really great morning routine, actually, that kind of also touches on that sort of well-being mindfulness piece, really. Can you share a little bit about that for everybody?
Sure. As I mentioned, I'm an engineer by training, who also has now delved a little bit into like the more kind of woo-woo side, because for me it was this idea of, I'm incredibly curious, and I would like for my life to be full and done well. And I think one of those things became a little bit too much of an obsession with efficiency. So I did the classic thing of like cold plunge in the morning and hack my way to the perfect day, and it did not work. So one of the things that became really important to me was actually spending a bit of time every morning figuring out what the heck I was going to do with that day. In part because whether you're a solopreneur or you've got a team, how you show up each day kind of really matters. And there's 1,001 fires that can come up during your day that you're going to have to manage. And if you don't take that moment, at least if you're me, I end up running around like a headless chicken trying to put out every fire I can. So for me, what I do every morning is I wake up and, I do some yoga, I do bits and bobs, but I have a notebook that I keep on my desk, and I will literally write on the left page, on one page, I'll just jot anything that's on the front of my mind. So if I'm mulling and ruminating about something that annoyed me, or I've had this really cool idea, or whatever it is, I will literally just for one page write about it so it's off my brain. And then on the next page, I basically set an intention for my day. I'll jot down a couple of gratitudes. Then I do insights. I'll reflect on what went well, what didn't go well the day before. This next one's been really key for me in terms of my leadership and management. I pick the values that I'm working on. So what am I working on embodying that day? Sometimes it's patience and compassion. Sometimes, for me, a lot of times it's accountability within my team. So actually holding people accountable to do what they're meant to do. So I'll pick values of what I'm working on embodying and and I'll write down a specific note about how I'm actually embodying those values. Then it's any habits that kind of reinforce those. And then for me, it's key tasks. So I have 7 key tasks each day. Sometimes it's fewer, and they're not big, huge, sweeping things. They're actual small micro tasks. If there's something that I didn't do the day before that I've been avoiding, it goes top of my key tasks. If there's things that I'll do that'll make me feel better as a human, like, for example, I had been unintentionally avoiding one of my friends. I'd missed a couple calls from her, and I just had then felt guilty, and I had been avoiding it. That went like right up there. Send her a message. Or things that also will really move the needle for my day. So like if there's a meeting I need to have, if there's a deck I need to get out, if there's an investor I need to talk to. So I have those 7 items. And then basically before I can do anything else in the day, I do those 7 micro tasks. and they're all knocked out, they're all done, and then I can go into my day. And so it's really helpful for me because it builds that accountability and it builds that intention and that forward thinking. And it really makes sure that I'm not being avoidant, because I think as an entrepreneur, we have so many things that come up in our day. We have so many things that we need to do. You have to prioritize, and you have to learn to be surgical and savage with effective prioritization. And I notice really quickly there'll be things that'll drop off my to-do list, and I never think about them again because they're really not that important. Or there's things that then will pester me, and those then I need to learn to kind of actually really to prioritize and lean into. Eat That Frog, for everyone who's read that wonderful book.
Yeah, it's a good book. You can rattle through it in about half an hour, but it's highly worth it. Any more questions from the floor, Ali?
Yes. What is your top tip for a young person starting out in entrepreneurship?
Ooh, top tip. I think the first thing is to ask yourself why you're doing it. If you are doing it because it seems fun and you get to go work on a beach somewhere, la la la, maybe ask yourself, is being an entrepreneur really the thing you want to do? But I think the most important thing is just stay curious. When you're doing it, it's so easy, especially when you're young, to get caught up in all these different. You'll meet tons of entrepreneurs. You'll get caught up in bunches of different like games of. I know for me, the group of entrepreneurs I was around when I was in my late 20s, mid 20s, was everyone was always doing oh, my company is doing so great. We're so wonderful. We're raising this and that. When I also actually knew that all those founders were really struggling. Just get curious as to what you're doing, why you're doing it, and don't worry as much, if you can, about the labels of the game. You will figure it out. You will get it done. Every route is not the same. No success is one of the others. And I think actually one of the most important things is to define what success means for you. Like, so what are you doing it? Why are you doing it? And what are you going to get out of it? Because that will unlock a lot of your path and will save you from doing some of the probably comical missteps that I did in mine. On a book note, if you've never read the book Venture Deals, if you're an entrepreneur who's seeking to raise capital, total side note, the last panel made me think about this, read the book Venture Deals. It's an incredibly helpful guide to understanding, like what Rob was mentioning, liquidation preferences, all the different terms and clauses that they'll often ask for. And it's written by 2 VCs, and they're actually writing it for founders. So they're actually going to teach you, they talk about some tricks that VCs often use, things like sleight of hand almost that they'll use, where they'll kind of make you look at another term and sneak another one in. It's super helpful. If you're planning on raising any capital at any point in time, read Venture Deals. It's a bright orange book. It's hard to miss.
Time for one more? Do you have a clear idea of where you want to be in 5 years' time?
Yes. Part of me wants to say retired. I know that is not true. Yes, for me in 5 years' time, I would love for the business that one of the businesses I'm about to launch to be obsolete. I would love for our company to actually no longer need to exist anymore. And for me as an individual, like totally selfishly, I would love to be a full-time board advisor and board member, and just because for me, I think as an entrepreneur, I loved forging things into reality. I'm going to use that phrase way too many times. And I loved the building of elements. But actually now the great joy I have is seeing and helping other people do that. So I think for me it would be to just actually get to sit and have the touch points that I have with companies make a difference. And the number one thing I'd love to be doing in 5 years is I would love to be sitting on stage in Davos telling people about how sustainability is finally on the stinking board agenda for companies. I won't go down that rabbit hole, but that is you've heard me rant about that soapbox a lot. But yeah, so yes, I do. And I think that's from asking myself, and I wish I could take credit for asking those questions I was asking you earlier. I learned those the hard way, and I learned those from other people. It's because I've stopped to ask myself, what do I want out of what I'm doing? And part of that will also be, I'll be totally honest, one of the companies that I'm building will be a lifestyle business. I will never exit it. I will never take capital for it, in part because it will be cash flow positive. And I will hire an MD as soon as we have the capital available for it. I will bring in a managing director who will run that company for me. I will continue to set the vision. I will bring in some other board members to set the vision, and I will not have to be that day to day. And the other business will probably be angel invested and probably a longer term horizon and exited. And then we're talking about building an angel syndicate as well. And that one, hopefully I'll get to spend more of my time on. So, I mean, for me, it's really clear on what I want my businesses to do. And hopefully then I can just be sitting on a beach retired somewhere.
Be retired for all of 6 hours.
For all of 6 hours. Maybe I'll make it to 12 this time. We can hope.
Perfect. There is time for one more audience question, actually, Emily, if you've got one more.
Yeah, brilliant. One more here. You said you're wanting to invest in impactful businesses. Would you ever consider offering mentoring to a not-for-profit?
Massively. I mentor quite a few companies, whether that's just a one-off or super light touch or also more in depth. If I also am not the right fit. So this is an open offer to anyone in this room. I'm always happy to chat. My door is literally always open. And if I am not the right person for you, I have a wonderful network who I'm happy to introduce because I know the impact that someone saying that to me has had on my career and the times that when I didn't have that, the impact it's had. So I would always be happy to chat. I will happily introduce you guys to anyone that I know who would be a better fit because it's standing by what I said to you before of reach out to people. And yeah, not-for-profit, for-profit doesn't really make a difference for me. All this, at the end of the day, you've got a product that you're trying to sell, you've got an impact that you're trying to make, and the application might be slightly different, but the places that you're going aren't dissimilar. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you for those questions. I have one more just to
it.
round this off. And I'm only asking this because I know the answer and I just thought it was wonderful. Tell us about your role models. Who are your role models?
Oh, goodness. So as we spoke about before, I don't know if I have someone that like I singularly aspire to. I have a lot of people there's elements of them I admire, and you're chuckling because you know 3 of them. 3 of them are rather ridiculous characters. I really adore Cher, Dolly Parton, and Taylor Swift for very different reasons, not actually necessarily their music. I love the fact that Dolly Parton has basically just blazed her own path. I don't know if you don't know anything about her impact, Google her. The woman has like built hundreds of libraries. I think it's something like several million books have gone into school systems that are undervalued. She's made sure that kids are fed. When people told her that one time that she was dressed like a harlot, she said, well, what is wrong with being a harlot? They work hard and they should be respected. So I'm going to dress even worse so that they feel safe. And like has literally just gone out and been ridiculous. Cher's lost her fortune 3 times due to people getting in her way and has made it all back. Taylor Swift filled every food bank for every city that she was touring in the UK. Like, so for me, it's people like Von Schoonard, who basically, with the founder of Patagonia, people who just kind of are unwaveringly comfortable with being themselves and chasing their impact. I have so much time for because I spent huge parts of my life being so worried about if what I wanted to be was okay and if the impact I wanted to make was enough or if who I would be good enough. And people who have found joy in chasing their own impact, I have so much respect for.
Amazing. Liza, honestly, it's been a privilege talking to you this afternoon and in all the time leading up to this. So thank you so, so much for being in Cornwall.
Thank you. For
we're so grateful. And huge round of applause, please, for Liza.
Thank you.